Minimalists.
All right, now before we dive into our surprise questions today, and before we talk about, well, owning next to nothing, I guess, let's read some more about less. Youheum, this is where we try to dissect an article, or we at least use an article as a jump-off point for a discussion. The one that I have here today it's an old article from our friend Colin Wright.
Yeah, you picked a good one, man.
It's called All 51 Things I Own, and I especially like the update at the end of this. So I'm gonna read this, and we'll use it as a point of discussion. One of the most popular posts ever here on Exile Lifestyle, which is the name of Colin's blog. By the way, Colin is the person who introduced us to minimalism first. Ryan and me, he introduced both of us to minimalism back in 2009. All right. One of the most popular posts ever here on Exile Lifestyle was all 72 things I own, wherein I took a photo of each and every object I owned in the world and was shocked to find that I had only 72 items. Well, that was back in November, and I think this was November of like 2008 or something. Back when I was living in Buenos Aires, a lifetime ago, and seeing how this is the 100th post here on the blog, I thought it would be a good time to revisit this concept and see how much I still own. I had a vague notion that I wanted to be down to 50 items by the time I moved to New Zealand, and it looks like I met that goal. In fact, today I was at 47 things, not too shabby. But this morning, a magical thing happened. 4 t-shirts arrived in the mail. T-shirts that I designed for Exile Lifestyle. He said, yay. Oh, wait. I guess I should have only ordered 3 shirts. Drat. That's okay, though, because you know what? Rules were meant to be broken, especially rules created by you for a competition against yourself as part of a project also created by you.
That's very meta.
Yeah. I'll continue to reduce as I stop using things. I imagine some of the other shirts I own will be on the cutting block soon. But as of this moment, I've got 51 things, and that's fine with me. Below is a list of what you're looking at in the photos above in the same order. Click on any of the photos to be taken to its Flickr page where there is a more detailed description, including brands where applicable, and a larger photo. And there's a little note here. It should be noted that I counted some things together, the glasses and their case, for example. By the way, this is the thing that early on, I did a parody of this on our blog. It was the 288 things I own.
Yeah.
And people still quote it a decade later. Like,
oh, wow.
Joshua Fields Milburn owns 2288 things. It's
Dude,
like,
I think you
didn't read it.
Yeah, like you put all your books in as one thing.
Right. And that's what I was saying. Like, I think all of my underwear they're all in one drawer. So I'm just going to say that's one thing.
Yeah.
And, but it poses all kinds of other questions, right? Like, what if I have, 2 socks? If I'm wearing 2 socks, is that 2 items, or is it one pair of socks, 1 item?
Yeah.
And when we get to that level of granularity, it misses the greater point of simplifying is important for other reasons, not how many, not for an arbitrary number of items that I own, right? And then also, like, I wouldn't include anything like Colin says here. Like, I don't include anything that's consumable. Like, is my deodorant an item or not? Is my toothpaste an item or not? I don't know. Like, and after I've used it, does it mean I don't own the item anymore? It becomes very confusing, right? And so he has a list, and we'll put a link to this post in the show notes of the 51 things he owned at the time. But then there's an update at the very end of it. And I wanted to talk about this because I thought this was the most important part of this blog post.
Yeah.
And it says, update, December 11th, 2016. I stopped posting photos of all the things I own several years ago when I discovered that it seemed to reinforce the idea that minimalism means owning as few things as possible, right? And he said, that's not the case. We're not any better or more moral when we own less. The idea is to own exactly the right number of things for you and your priorities. Yeah. And that will mean something different for everyone. If you want to focus on travel and experiences like me, and actually, Youheum, you're getting ready to travel for a year, I think I heard you say. Is that right?
Yes, I am.
So where are you headed?
Well, my first stop is Japan, and then I'll just go with the flow for the rest of the trip.
I love it.
Yeah.
And you're not bringing a couch with you or a dining room table.
Couch, no blenders, no,
No
juicers.
blenders. Yeah, no juicers.
So what Colin is saying is here, if you want to focus on travel and experiences like me or like Youheum, chances are you'll want to own less because everything you own is likely something you'll have to carry, like I do, or store somewhere, which is wildly inconvenient and potentially expensive. Um, uh, he goes on to say, if you need equipment or gadgetry to do your work, if your passion is collecting unicorn statuettes, if you're truly fulfilled by owning all the books you've ever read, then you should. Just don't buy the big screen TV you feel you're supposed to own. Save that money for more unicorn statuettes. I would just like to interject here and say, I mean, this is true. People like Youheum or Colin or even Ryan enjoy travel a lot more than me. I actually strongly dislike traveling, even though Ryan and I over the last decade have traveled all over the world together, going on book tours and film tours and speaking gigs and all this other stuff. But I'm not a giant fan of travel. It's not something that I'm passionate about. But if I was, and I was traveling perpetually, like Colin Wright say, I would own different things from what I own right now. If you're watching this video on the video version, you can see behind me there is a couch. And I wouldn't have that couch if I was traveling perpetually. It would not fit in the overhead bin of the airplane very well. And so figuring out what is appropriate for my life also depends on the current circumstance, because at 38, I'll be 39 years old soon with a family. I own things that are different from when I first became a minimalist. And I'm imagining that is true for you as well. When you first started simplifying, I'm sure that you owned things that were different from what you own now. And now that you're getting ready to travel, you probably even own less.
Definitely, I feel like I'm continuing to figure out what I want and need, and that's where that flexibility comes from, where I'm not like, oh, this is the amount of things that I'm going to keep, and then it's never going to change forever. It's more about flexible and figuring out what my needs are on the go, because every day, every week, it becomes different. I discover something new, and I'm constantly changing, so adding and letting go always happens.
Well, it's interesting how your travel experience, you just said you're going to go with the flow. Yeah. I mean, you have a little bit of a plan, but you don't have it, planned out for the entire year.
Right.
And because you keep it light, you were able to turn your life around on the dime, because you don't own a lot of things. So, again, what you've done is you've taken minimalism. And what you do with your YouTube channel and what we're doing now is we're showing how you can take minimalism and you can use it to travel more. Josh uses minimalism to, satisfy his OCD-ness. No, I'm kidding, Josh. But we all use it for different reasons. I mean, for me, I also can turn my life around on a dime somewhat. I mean, yeah, I have furniture. So if I had to pick up and move, I would have to either let go of my furniture or get a moving truck. So it's a little bit more difficult for me, but I don't have any debt. And that's really where it started for me with minimalism, was getting rid of as much debt as possible. And now that I don't have debt, I am able to survive on, not a ton of income, but ultimately I can turn my life around on a dime. And I'll tell you what, if I had to let go of my furniture, me and my wife could totally do that, because what we've done over the last, what I've done over the last 10 years, Mariah and I have been together going on 7 years. What we've done is we have developed this power of letting go. And I think that is the best superpower that someone can have. And minimalism helps you to get that power of letting go.
Now, Colin finishes this article with a paragraph that says, which is to say that you should prioritize your time, energy, and resources for the stuff that really matters. That may be possession stuff. That may be relationship stuff. That may be personal hobbies and project stuff. Most likely, it'll be a uniquely shaped combination of all of these things, and that is worth embracing. You needn't own a few dozen possessions to be a minimalist. You just have to focus on the vital things and act accordingly. And the thing I love about this is you're seeing sort of the evolution of Colin Wright in real time, where he started this blog, and quite often with minimalism, it starts with the stuff, and then it it broadens out to letting go of other things that aren't, material possessions, but it might mean letting go of toxic relationships, or letting go of commitments, or letting go of a career that is no longer serving you, or it might mean letting go of any number of things that are no longer serving a purpose or bringing you joy in your life. It often starts with the stuff, but pretty soon we move past many of the things because the things were in the way. They were the physical manifestation of what was going on inside us. And as we let go of the things, we're able to start dealing with that sort of internal clutter. And Youheum, I know you talk about this on your YouTube channel. You talk a lot about mindfulness. Can we talk a bit about the internal clutter that we have going on inside us?
I think that's where it all starts from. The physical clutter starts from the mental clutter, because when I'm not taking care of letting go on a conscious level on a daily basis, which is the practice, then it tends to manifest physically, and I feel depraved, and I can't connect with abundance, and I can't really think outside of the box and entertain the possibility that I can live with less. There's too much fear block, there's too much anxiety block, shame and guilt, and taking care of that, doing the emotional decluttering, which I like to use, that's the real practice.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about that emotional decluttering. Are there any tips that you have for people who are listening to this, if they're experiencing a lot of emotional declutter or emotional clutter, and they're beginning to declutter the physical things? What do you recommend to look inward and start to deal with some of those emotions?
I feel like what's important for me in my decluttering physically as well is to just look at all the junk that I've accumulated. Just take everything out, and then acknowledge that I have this much things. So emotional decluttering is the same thing. I go in and explore myself through meditation, through reflective journaling, any technical tools, and then I see that I have been holding on to all of these negative emotions for such a long time, and maybe I have some trauma or some deep pain inside, so I go into that and then let that be recognized and accepted, instead of running away from the clutter, running away from the negative emotions.
Yeah, I love that. Wow, those are two great tools, journaling and meditation, to really get clear on what that internal clutter is.
Exactly.
One thing I'll add to that is I have a really good therapist. I mean, I talk to him maybe once, twice, 3 times a year, but I go to an outside source that is unbiased. I talk to Josh a lot. I talk to my wife a lot. But sometimes you need someone who isn't so close to your life to kind of give you their perspective, someone that you trust. And I think that's a good tool as well to help people deal with that emotional clutter. Because really what a good therapist does is they help you gain a different perspective on what you have going on. And that is, a lot of us can just use a different perspective, because a lot of the times that different perspective helps us let go of that feeling of trauma or whatever mental clutter we have going on.
You bring up a great point about not running away from it, but in many ways running toward it, or at least embracing it and recognizing the fact that we're all good. We're all dealing with our own sort of internal struggles, our own battles. By the way, we all have problems, and minimalism isn't going to solve all of your problems. It's going to help you improve your problems over time. You're going to have better problems as you solve your current problems. But the point of life is not to get rid of all of our problems. Your life is going to be extremely boring if you all of a sudden wake up one day and you've gotten rid of all of your problems. In fact, I'm looking at right now this current environment that we are in, amid a bunch of problems. I don't know if I have the coronavirus right now. I do have some cold symptoms, but I'm hopeful that I don't. I have been self-quarantining for a while. That is a problem, but all the other problems that are coming along with this, there are economic uncertainties that are going on right now. Obviously, the problem of losing certain freedoms or conveniences that we have, and that becomes a problem. But with all of these problems, sometimes we need them because they help us grow. They push us outside our discomfort zone, they push us outside of our comfort zone in a way into the wilderness of discomfort, so that we can actually expand our comfort zone. It almost seems like a paradox. Comfort is sort of a very tricky thing, because if we are relying on comfort, if we're always pursuing comfort, that comfort zone gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But if we tend to embrace discomfort, whether it's the emotional clutter, the mental clutter, the spiritual clutter, the internal clutter that's going on, if we can face that, then we actually expand our comfort zone as we embrace the discomfort. Now, Youheum, I wanted to talk to you about. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I just want to expand a little bit on the having no problems and being too comfortable. I think that we are constantly striving for this comfort. We're constantly striving for a life with no problems. But, when I look at people who don't have problems, the first thing that comes to mind is like, a kid whose parents, with all the best intentions, just want that kid to have no problems. Well, what happens is that child will start to create problems that really don't exist. So even when we do live a problem-free life, the human psyche will go out of its way to create a problem, because ultimately that's what we do best. We take a problem and we solve it, and that's where innovation comes from. That's where drive comes from. So living a problem-free life, even if you, me, and Youheum could wave a magical wand, Josh, and take away everyone's problems, I guarantee it wouldn't be long before people were creating new problems.
You, Me, and Youheum sounds like a really good sitcom.
Or a band.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Youheum, I love your YouTube channel because, well, I mean, and by the way, we'll just recommend it to folks. So there's a link to it in the show notes as well. Heal Your Living is the name of your YouTube channel, but you have some videos on there. I just wanted to go through a few of my favorites, and we could talk about the nuances of these. So you have a video about the things I don't buy. Can we talk about some of the things that you don't buy for our audience here?
Yeah, first of all, I try not to buy single-use items. So that's something that I've been practicing, because sustainability is also a part of my minimalism practice. And then it's not specific items, but items that I, at that moment, don't feel like it's necessary. Yeah, it's not really a set things that I'm rejecting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ryan and I have something called the wait for it rule, because quite often we all feel the tug of impulse, right? We hear about driving under the influence, but I think we are all living under the influence of impulse. You go to your local grocery store and you have all these impulse purchases right there at the cash register, because they know you're going to buy that piece of chocolate, or you're going to buy that pack of gum, or that candy bar, whatever it might be. But we're facing this now, especially with online shopping. Impulse is, I mean, we're being aggregated toward any of these impulse purchases. So Ryan and I came up with something called the wait for it rule. It's also known as the 30-30 rule. If anything costs more than $30, I try to wait at least 30 hours to buy the thing. And even if I feel like I need it, just taking that day to pause, that extra day and a few extra hours on top of that to pause, makes me wonder, okay, do I actually need this? Will it actually add value to my life? Is this the best use of this money? And if not, and quite often this is the case, I don't end up buying it. And by the way, if something's more than $100, then I tend to wait 30 days before buying it. And I found that rule stops the impulse, but also keeps me from buying a bunch of things I never needed in the first place. Now, you on your YouTube channel as well, you have something called, you have a video about your furniture-free minimalist apartment. And folks who are familiar with our documentary, Minimalism, a documentary about the important things on Netflix, you can see my apartment I lived in at the time when we were filming that, and I owned next to nothing. It's not that I didn't have any furniture. I did have some, but you've taken even a step farther here, where you don't own any furniture. You look in the video, and it almost looks like you've moved out of the apartment. Now, how does this work for you?
Well, I first started it not because of more on minimalism as the focus, but more so on sustainability as well as just mindfulness of my movement. So I realized that I'm restricting myself physically and by having these furnitures where I have to fit my body into it. And because it's there, I get the urge, oh, I should sit on that and fit my body into that object. And, that I think was the motivation for me going furniture free, less so about minimalism.
I love
Makes
that.
sense.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, no, you go. No, please, you best friend, you go.
Well, you've got another video on your channel about getting rid of everything, and this is an impulse that I feel all the time, even now as a minimalist. Like, I think Ryan jokes about my OCD, which I actually do have, but there are times where I do feel the tug to, like, even if you're watching the video right now and you see my living room, there's not much in here, but there's a time where I'll look at that lamp and say, why the hell do I have that lamp? And or do I really need this couch? Or, okay, I've got this coffee table, which you see behind me. Do I actually need that? Or if I move over to the side here, you can see my reading chair. And it's like, do I need a couch and a reading chair? And so all of these things, I do feel this sort of compulsion and also this impulse to let go of these things. And so I think we need to be careful, make sure we're letting go of things for the right reason. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, tapping into myself, and the furniture free thing, again, it's about mindfulness. So I just tapped into, do I really need this? And is the need for furniture coming from a place where I'm craving comfort? Am I obsessed about having this kind of lifestyle where I have material abundance? Or am I just trying to fill a hole? Yeah, so that motivated me to let go.
Talk about your extreme minimalist laundry routine and why do you practice this extreme minimalist laundry routine?
I feel like this is just me and I'm doing it and it's a part of my day, and then I have that label extreme minimalism to kind of wrap it up and then put it in a box. But it's, for me, again, it's a practice of being mindful of caring for my clothes deeply and paying attention, not just throwing it in the machine and letting it do its thing and then coming back and taking care of it. I'm in the process and I enjoy that process, and it's not like everybody else does, but it works out for me, and that, I think, is the extreme minimalism that a lot of people perceive in my practice.
Yeah, I love that it's like a ritual almost. And I could totally see getting into that. It's like when I make coffee in the morning, I grind the beans fresh, I do a pour over, I measure everything out, and sometimes I find myself making like a second or third cup of coffee just because I love the routine of making a single cup. And I'll have friends and family visit, and they're like, why don't you have a coffee maker? Like, it's so, like, especially if we have a couple guests over, I got to do individual cups of coffee for everyone. But I actually like having that routine and being very intentional with everything. And I'll tell you, the minimalist laundry routine, you're actually treating your clothes better because your clothes will last longer that way. And it seems practical from that standpoint, but also, like, especially if you're traveling, how practical is it to be able to, like, do your laundry on the go?
Yeah. And plus, I don't have enough clothes to throw in the laundry. I can't wait, because I need fresh clothes to wear in a couple of days. I can't wait until it piles up and then do it. Right?
Oh, now you're just bragging.
Yeah. Let's get competitive here.
Yeah, right. No, I think that's it's another practical tip for traveling in general. I think when we have like a 2-week trip planned, I know when I did, I used to bring clothes for every single day. And then Mariah and I, we started doing these trips where it was 3 weeks. Sometimes we'll be gone for a month. And what I've realized, if I can just bring 5 outfits, enough clothes for 5 days, and maybe you've got only 3 days, Youheum, but that saves so much room. And even me, who I don't hand wash my clothes, but so me who has to go find a washer and dryer, it's very easy to find on the road. But I have once I've had to wash things by hand, and it wasn't that big of a deal. So
Ryan, I'm thinking about when we've been on the road before, and we would even do these little challenges, and it proves that no one will actually really notice. Now, you're a much sweatier person than I am, so I don't know that you can recall.
I mean, if
But,
we're having a contest, yeah.
you would definitely win that contest. But I remember once we were on the road, we were on tour, and I was just seeing how many days I could wear the same shirt in a row. And I'm a aggressively hygienic person, but just to see how many days in a row without washing it, I could wear the same black T-shirt. And it was 9 days, and of course, no one noticed it. And after the 9th day, on day 10, I tried it, and the shirt started to smell a little bit. So I was not ready to extend the experiment any farther. But it goes to show that our limitations are what we create, and quite often we can go way beyond those limitations without even a whole lot of effort.
You know, Josh, I don't like how you're rubbing in your no sweat privilege in my face.
Hey, let's talk about sound minimalism. What is sound minimalism?
It's about letting go of the things that distract me when it comes to sound. So not being in a place where it's very loud and not listening to music constantly, as well as choosing words carefully so that I don't say the words that are unnecessary and perhaps that are a bit violent or passive aggressive. So it's minimizing the noise I'm creating, as well as being in an environment that is less stimulating noise-wise.
Yeah. It's
We have a
interesting.
friend,
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Nate Green. We have a friend, Nate Green, who says, "Speak only when it adds more value than silence," and that really resonated with me because quite often I try to. There are these awkward moments, and we try to fill that silence with these sort of just noxious, vapid or empty conversations. And when you're with someone that you really care about, what I've realized, if it's someone like Ryan, or with my wife Bex, or podcast Sean and I were hanging out a few weeks ago, you can drive down the road or walk together without having to fill every moment with conversation. In fact, it often makes those conversations that do occur much more meaningful because you aren't doing it because you're compelled to speak. You're speaking because you have something compelling to say.
Yeah, I love that. I was going to just say, like, imagine if we all practice that. Only speaking when it added value to the situation. I mean, how different would social media be?
Definitely. Invite mindfulness into social media.
Yeah, totally.
You know, Ryan, when you first did your packing party, and we had boxed up all of your furniture and all of your stuff, and you were pretending as though you were moving. We were in your big condo with those giant ceilings, and the first thing that you noticed, that you pointed out, is it actually sounded different in your living room. And we sort of ascertained that maybe that is the sound of simplifying, or that is the sound of minimalism. Is sometimes there might be an echo in your space, and you can embrace that because it means that you've gotten rid of that which is superfluous. Youheum, do you sleep in a hammock still?
I do. But now that I'm traveling, I'm getting used to going back to the bed or sleeping on the floor. I'm going to miss my hammock.
It seems like the most sanitary thing to do while you're traveling. Like if you brought your hammock with you, I don't know how you would be able to set it up in every single
I was really tempted,
but
but the weight issue and, and also being able to do it indoors, it would be figuring it out would be difficult.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I love that we bring this up because yes, you could like continue this extreme minimalism by bringing your hammock, but it actually would create more problems than it would solve. Yeah. And again, it's just important to recognize that, are you using this lifestyle of simplicity to solve problems, or is it creating problems? If it's creating problems, well then that's a problem.
All right, so obviously you're getting ready to travel, Youheum, and so you won't be living. You were living with your sister in Austin, is that right?
Yes, I was living with my sister and my cat as well.
Okay. And so you're an extreme minimalist, and you might be more extreme than her. How do you make that work?
Yeah, she doesn't really identify with extreme minimalist, and I use that word to convey my practice. And we make it work by just practicing nonviolent communication. And it wasn't always like this. Before, I would get anxious and I would project and make her feel guilty for having things and for not following my kind of lifestyle. So I would guilt trap her and manipulate her. But I was honest with her and told her that I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to be a manipulative person. So we practice nonviolent communication, which is by Marshall B. Rosenberg. And we just clearly state our needs and say, this is my kind of a way of being, and this is how I find joy and happiness. And we come to an understanding just by being transparent and being honest, instead of being passive aggressive and forcing in a subtle way, but that's still very disturbing. So we practice that on a daily basis.
Well, I've never heard of that book, Nonviolent Communication, but I think what you're talking about is one of the keys to nonviolent communication, and that is, it's talking about your needs instead of, like you said, projecting. You do this, you do that. I can't believe you don't do that. Instead of projecting, you're taking responsibility for why you have the feelings you feel. And just to kind of add, and again, I actually want to read this book now because I would be very much interested to see what all of it suggests. I would imagine, though, it talks about also when you're speaking to someone, when you are feeling those negative feelings, that first and foremost, like, you're showing respect. So you're not using this angry speak, that you are also showing that you understand where they're coming from. Because that's really what we all want. We all want to be respected, and we all want to be understood. And I think that if you could keep that in mind when you're trying to express this anger or this discomfort that you're feeling, it creates for some meaningful conversation instead of some toxic conversation.
Yeah. What we try to do is just set a boundary with the tool of nonviolent communication. So the boundary is what's more important. The nonviolent communication is a way for me to cultivate that boundary, but having that boundary is the most precious thing ever when living with somebody who has a very different lifestyle.
I love that. And you two came up with a boundary together.
Yeah.
It wasn't, you didn't set the boundary and said, this is my boundary. It was more about having a conversation about what that boundary is that you both can agree on, and then sticking to it.
Yeah. I mean, if I did say that, it would be going back to force and being violent. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I definitely applaud you for that, because it takes a lot of courage to be able to approach someone and say, hey, I have been manipulative, or I have been living in a way or acting in a way that is not in accordance with my own values. And we can continue to live in that way, which is not bringing, which is not strengthening our relationship. It's not supportive. It's not caring. It's not loving. Or we can choose a different path, and it's going to be more difficult, right? But it'll actually, somewhat confusingly, it'll be a simpler path, because being honest and being upfront is much simpler. It doesn't mean that it's easy. In fact, some of these things are much more difficult than simply being passive aggressive. That's easy. Being manipulative is easy. Lying is the easiest thing to do, but it is not simple. It is not intentional. It is skirting our own responsibility for our own personal gain, and obviously that's not a place we want to be. So I certainly applaud you for that, and allows us to live with the people and coexist with people who don't have the same exact preferences as us. And guess what? If you're going to cohabitate with someone, whether it is a significant other or a roommate or a brother or sister or a child even, you have to be able to communicate with them, because they are going to have different preferences. And you have to be able to not just tolerate those preferences, but accept and respect, and eventually even appreciate the fact that they have different preferences from you. Speaking of living in the home with someone else, we all have our own responsibilities in the home. And part of that has to do with just cleaning up the house, a relatively practical thing. We all have to clean our homes. You have a video about your extreme minimalist cleaning routine. You want to talk about extreme minimalist cleaning, Youheum?
And the laundry routine is actually a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't own a vacuum. Back to what things that I don't own.
Mm-hmm.
And I just use my physical body, what I have, and the ancient tools, or a good old broom and a dustpan, and then I use a rag to maybe spend 2 hours mindfully cleaning, getting into the nooks and crannies, and doing that. It makes me feel appreciative of the tools that I own, even though it's not luxurious, even though it's not expensive. I'm tell myself that this is here for me and I can use it to clean this house and feel satisfied at the end. I don't need a fancy vacuum cleaner to do the job for me.
I love the mindfulness.
Now, Ryan, I'm not in the same room as Youheum, but I don't know if you're getting the same sort of. She projects a sense of calm, even over the audio that I'm listening to. In fact, I can't even see the two of you right now. I'm only speaking to you on audio, but I get a sense of calm, and that the words she speaks are deliberate, but also, like, as we're talking, I myself feel my core body temperature sort of cooling, and I feel like more relaxed just talking to her.
Totally. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more, Josh. And what I'm really getting from you, Youheum, is how you use minimalism to be as comfortable with yourself as you can.
Yes.
And that is, I think everyone could use that power of being as comfortable as they can with themselves.
That sort of brings me to the next point. Is you have a video about going without makeup, and it's something we've talked about. We've talked about with other guests on the podcast before. Reducing makeup or going without altogether. What prompted that decision for you?
I was wearing so much makeup actually, long time ago, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
And you can't really imagine how I look like. It's pretty bad, and it was just so unnatural for me. Not that wearing makeup is unnatural, but I was just not accepting of myself who was wearing loads of makeup. And that's the difference, where there are people who wear makeup and they love it. They love how they look. They love how they feel. But I was wearing a lot of makeup and I didn't like how I looked. And what I'm saying, when it was bad, it means internally it was bad, not how I looked. Because I wasn't accepting myself. I wasn't practicing self-love. So I felt that I could invite some practice of letting go to accept my authentic self and be comfortable in my own skin. And maybe in the future I might wear makeup, and maybe I might wear it and then feel good. But I'm not at that point. So I just feel like I can just not wear makeup and feel comfortable now. Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Mariah, she might wear a little eyeliner or something, but she, to me, is more beautiful when she doesn't wear makeup. And I know a lot of times, like, she's insecure with a blemish or whatever she has going on, but it's funny because I love her so much. Like, I don't really see any blemishes, even if they're there. And it's more important for me for her to be comfortable with who she is than have to feel like she needs to project something or be something that, I wouldn't accept her if she wasn't projecting that certain image. And it's a good way to tell, who your true friends are too. If your friends are judging you for not wearing makeup, well, then you can kind of filter out who your true friends are if they're going to judge you based on the makeup that you wear, or if you wear makeup at all.
Yeah. Ryan, I couldn't imagine you going to Mariah and say, well, in order for us to have a thriving relationship, you have to wear makeup. Yeah. And really what you're saying is, I prefer it one way, but I'm leaving the preference up to you. It's what do you feel most comfortable with? And I will accept you for whoever you or however you are, however you want to behave. And because I love you, it doesn't matter to me what your personal preference is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, looks like Podcast Sean has some surprise questions for us this week. You want to read the first one here from Manuel?
Yes. What are the pros and cons, if any, of extreme minimalism? So,
Youheum, are there pros, are there cons, are there both?
Well, in my practice, yes, definitely. Yeah. Because I just do what I love. And the result is extreme minimalism. Yeah. Just continuously doing that. So the benefits is
Did you say
happiness.
there are any cons?
The benefits is happiness. Yeah.
Yes.
So what are the
The
cons?
cons?
Are there any cons?
To be very technical, I would say it takes a lot of time. Yeah, to figure it out. Yeah, and maybe I get tired of tapping into myself. And some days, I'm not so in tune. I'm not as mindful. I'm not as calm. So dealing with that part of myself as well during the practice of extreme minimalism. That's the tough part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, nothing in life worth doing is easy. So certainly it's going to be difficult to practice extreme minimalism. But, if anything, your extreme minimalism helps you deal with like the imperfectness.
Definitely. Yeah.
And that is worth putting in the effort for. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if I just take the word extreme out for a moment, are there pros and cons of minimalism? Yeah, I think the pros certainly outweigh the cons. Although I will say that I think some people have more of a predisposition to be a minimalist than others. Do I think minimalism is inherently useful to everyone? No, not necessarily. I think there are quite a few people who are completely contented by the status quo. And if you are really happy with the status quo and you get really happy from accumulating more items, then who am I to say, well, that is the wrong way of living? However, if you feel discontented by the way that you've been living, if you feel discontented, especially by the material possessions and the desire for more that you're experiencing, then minimalism is a great tool. Now, the con side of things is we dealt with a question earlier today about, what if I reach the goal of minimalism and now I'm not happy, or I've reached the goal of minimalism, now what do I do? The biggest con is people mistake minimalism as though it were an end result. Of course, minimalism is not the end result, though. It is merely the path that'll lead you toward a more meaningful life. It is not, in and of itself, a meaningful life. And so we often get confused thinking that this blunt instrument is going to solve all of our problems as soon as we get there. But you're not going to get there. As soon as you reach the horizon, a new horizon will appear.
Yeah.
Kathleen has a question for us, Ryan.
Yeah. Before we move on to Kathleen's question, I do want to say the one con that I can think of is the judgment that people will have, the ostensible judgment. But here's the thing, though, is I was talking to a friend yesterday, and they were talking about how if you're living a life that is 100% in alignment with your values and beliefs, if you're living your best life, people will want to assassinate you. And that's how you know you're doing it well. So it is a con, but I'd rather have, people judging me rather than going with the flow and living a life of discontent.
It's like, how dare you be happy?
Right. How dare you be happier than me? Yeah. In fact, Kathleen's question kind of speaks to this. How do you distinguish between extreme minimalism and aligning with your values, and extreme minimalism being a source of pride and show-offness? So people, and this is, Kathleen, I think, is asking a genuine question, but I think this could be a projection in the sense that, Youheum, you're just showing off. So how do you differentiate between showing off, but also living a life that is meaningful for you?
And by the way, to finish Kathleen's question here, she said, Colin Wright lives his values. Someone else might live that way for attention. So what she's trying to distinguish here is the difference between extreme minimalism aligning with your values and extreme minimalism being a source of pride and show-offiness. So I could see how someone would want to show off. Yeah, look, I've gotten rid of everything. I'm mightier. I'm holier than thou. It doesn't seem to me, after talking to Youheum, that is the case with her or with Colin Wright, who I would also say is an extreme minimalist. But how do we make sure that we're focused on our values and not just showing off the lack of possessions?
Right. For me, it's more so about focusing on sharing instead of bragging. So that's why I focus on using words like I to focus on the individual experience. Well, I am the channel that this experience is shared, but it's not like I force others to say that, oh, that's the kind of lifestyle I want because she's telling me to live like that. It's more so I'm just expressing and being present and letting myself be perhaps a source of motivation or inspiration in a natural way, instead of, oh, you should be this, and if you're not doing that, you should feel shameful. So I feel like if some people perceive me as bragging, then that's a matter of that person's perception. It's never my intention.
I love that. And that's what it comes down to. It's your intention. So, you know, what she brings up with Colin Wright is Colin Wright isn't doing this in a judgy way. He's sharing. He's not bragging. So anyone who is concerned whether or not, you know, they are doing, they're living a minimalist lifestyle to show off, or if they're doing it to align with their values, that's a question that only that person can answer. Yes. What are their intentions? That's how you can kind of get to the root of that.
And Ryan, I've noticed that with Youheum and with Colin Wright, and even with us, we are, yes, we're sharing, but we're also not prescribing or proselytizing. I don't see Youheum trying to convert anyone to an extreme minimalist lifestyle and follow me and all these other things. It's simply, here's something that works for me. It may or may not work for you, and you can tweeze out ingredients and create your own recipe for a more deliberate, simpler life.
Yeah.
Nicole has a question here. Were the extreme minimalists once hoarders and are now just extreme in the opposite way? I don't know. Youheum, were you a hoarder at one point in time?
I was.
Interesting.
I was a shopping addict.
Yeah.
Well, I would say this, that the difference between hoarding and your version of extreme minimalism is your version of minimalism isn't Spartanism. So Spartanism means a compulsion to get rid of things and not being able to hold on to things, the inability to hold on to something, whereas hoarding is the inability to let go of something. And the difference here is with minimalism, or your version of extreme minimalism, what I'm seeing here is intention, the letting go intentionally. And there's no such thing as hoarding intentionally. You can collect things, and we know some people who are expert collectors. In fact, the real expert collectors are the curators at a museum. They have a collection of things that we can all appreciate. Maybe it's a collection of paintings or artwork, and we're able to appreciate that. That is different from hoarding, where it is the inability to let go of something. But on the other side of the spectrum, you're letting go of things and holding on to things as well, because they serve a purpose in your life. You're doing so with intention. Is that fair?
So true.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's kind of an unfair question because it's lumping all extreme minimalists in here. And if we were to just go off of, this anecdotal evidence of Youheum, then yes, every extreme minimalist used to be an extreme hoarder. But I think your extreme hoarding is different than what someone else's extreme hoarding was. So if you were a shopaholic, I too used to be a shopaholic, but you could walk through my living room without bumping into newspapers most days. But yeah, I bet your hoarding wasn't holding on to old newspapers, or was it
mostly clothes and makeup?
Yeah,
so mostly aesthetic, like things that I use to elevate my status or have some kind of identity.
Yeah. Well, I could see too, like, even looking at my lifestyle now, speaking of clothes, versus 10, 11 years ago, it was another extreme. 10 or 11 years ago, because I had 2 closets full of clothes, 15 pairs of Allen Edmonds shoes, suits and shirts and ties. And now, I had a neighbor over, we were playing a board game like a week ago, and he got a glance in our closet, and he's like, you and Mariah have less clothes in your closet than I have by myself in my place. Right. But I could totally empathize with where he's coming from, because I used to do that. I used to be that way. So yeah, I guess there's always going to be a little bit of extremism when you go from one side of the spectrum to the other. But just to Nicole's question here, I don't think every minimalist used to be some kind of crazy hoarder who couldn't let go of a newspaper. Josh couldn't let go of magazines. But even then, I could still walk into his office and sit down if I needed to.
Yeah, and I would say that it wasn't that I couldn't let go of them, is that I justified holding on to them for silly reasons.
Yeah.
And you mentioned makeup and clothes and the sort of aesthetic things that developed your identity. How do you develop, or how do you maintain an identity now? What composes your identity now that you've let go of those things that were sort of surface level things?
I think it's for me more about spiritual cultivation. So, what kind of person am I inside? Not borrowing these material things to feel better about myself, but just being honest with myself and seeing that I have imperfections, I have good sides and bad sides, and just being allowing mode of that instead of using these physical things to remind myself, oh yeah, I'm pretty. Oh, yeah, I'm smart. Oh, yeah, I'm this. So the reminders come from inside where the empowerment is.
I love that. It's interesting. There's this game called Would You Rather, and it's you pick two cards out of this deck, and it has two extreme things. And I was playing this a couple weeks ago, and I forget what the other option was, but one option was, would you rather be known as the stupidest person in the world? And then I forget what the other option was. But as soon as I heard like what I want to be known as the stupidest person in the world, I instantly was like, I don't care if people think of me as being stupid, because I don't look at myself as stupid. And that's what really matters. And I realized like simplicity and minimalism has helped me get to that point where I can look in the mirror and it doesn't matter how people judge me. It's how I look at myself. And I think unfortunately, we look to other people for judgment a lot of the times. I know I did. So if I was accepted by the cool kids, I felt cool. But when I look back, I really wasn't that cool. It was just that the cool kids accepted me. So yeah, I love how it's more about how you feel about your insides rather than what you think people perceive of you being on the outside. Really
shattering.
I love this game.
Yeah, really shattering that mirror. I love that.
I love the game of Would You Rather. We should do a minimalist edition of it, Ryan. Would you rather have a blender or a couch?
Let's do it.
Trick question. I could go without both.
Yeah, but which one would you rather have?
All right, Zach's got a question here. How do you describe your minimalist bedroom? It's just covered mine's covered in TVs. I got 27 TVs in my bedroom.
Yeah, right. The funny thing is that's actually the first thing that I was going to bring up is the way I would describe my minimalist bedroom is a lack of screens.
Yeah, and it's set up to do two things.
Yeah, your bed should be there for two things, neither of which involve a glowing screen.
Yeah,
and so. Also, maybe I would say like aggressively stark. Like I don't put anything on the walls, especially in our bedroom. We have a couple nightstands and a bed and a bench and like a dresser. And on the dresser, there's a speaker and some candles, and that's about it. And everything in there is either like wood or white. And so these sort of neutral tones, warm tones, but also the starkness of the white, but not superfluous. But I do have a bed and I don't have a hammock. So Youheum, how would you describe your minimalist bedroom?
I actually don't have a bedroom, so it's let the
there
competition begin.
Yeah.
Weird flex, but okay.
I'm sorry. So it's actually a place that I converted. That's a dining space. So I just have my hammock there. And I think the bedroom is just a label that we like to use for a place where we sleep and feel comfortable in. It's just technically a space. It doesn't have to have a bed. It doesn't have to be a room with four walls, right? Or a door. So for me, it's just a simple place where I just hang my hammock and sleep.
I love it.
Nothing special.
I imagine. So how do you hang your hammock? I'm curious. Like, do you have anchors in the wall that you had to put into studs? Okay.
Mounted on the wall.
I was like wondering, or if you had like the frame that comes with some hammocks. We have a hammock on our balcony, which is Mariah and I's like favorite place to hang out when the weather is nice. For some reason, it's been raining like the last 2 weeks in LA, but we'll go out there in the mornings and get in that hammock together and like read a book or like just like chill out. It's really nice, but it has that frame, and I wish we could somehow anchor it, but cool. Yeah, Mariah and I's bedroom, because we live in a studio loft. we have our bed, and we have an end table, and that's it. But it's by force, and we don't have any pictures on the wall because, I think pictures, they're there to alter moods. They're there to so we don't need pictures on our walls in our bedroom to alter our mood in the bedroom, because you
create the mood.
Exactly. Yeah. But in our living room, we've got paintings up. I have an artist friend who I have one of her paintings that are really nice, and some like blown up pictures of another friend's artist. But they're all there very deliberately, and they're creating a certain type of atmosphere that Mariah and I want to project. But yeah, in the bedroom specifically, one bed, one end table. That's all we have.
And it's really about your preferences, right? I mean, and even Bex and I have different preferences in our home, and we have to talk about some things when we don't agree about it. Now, we've set up a rule together that we don't bring something into the house unless we both agree on it. And that makes things difficult sometimes because one of us might want something, the other person doesn't, but it makes us talk about it, right?
But she keeps bringing Ella into the house, Josh.
That's a fair point. I never thought about that. We had some pictures on our dining room wall for a while, and they were driving me crazy. I don't like things on the wall, and so we had several conversations about removing them, and that just because I wanted to remove the pictures didn't mean I wanted to remove the love from our relationship. It just they didn't work for me, and so, because we care about each other and we respect each other's preferences, whichever person has a stronger preference about something tends to win out because we're respectful of the other person's desires. All right. Lisa has a question for us.
Do you know any extreme minimalists with kids?
Heck yeah. What about Leo Babauta?
Yeah.
He has 6 kids, and I would argue that he is the most extreme minimalist I know, except now I know Youheum, so maybe they can compete for 1 and 2. But Leo owns next to nothing. Now his family owns some stuff, and so maybe that's a loophole. He's able to he has the minimalist loophole where he's like, no, that's not my Rolls Royce. That's my daughter's.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's my 7-year-old daughter's Rolls Royce.
He also washes his T-shirts in the sink and owns pretty much nothing, and continues to streamline and downsize and untether in ways that I still find to be really inspirational, even though I may not want to mimic his behaviors exactly. So if someone like Leo Babauta, who has 6 kids, can be an extreme minimalist, then it may be appropriate for just about anyone who is looking at radically simplifying their life. What about you, Youheum? Do you know any extreme minimalists who happen to have kids as well?
Nobody who identifies as an extreme minimalist, but I know people that are just living about their life, and that's the natural expression, but no labels.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and quite often people get uncomfortable with these labels, and so you can use whatever label you want to use. Ryan talked about intentionalism or enoughism earlier. And, if any of these isms are more appropriate for you, I like to use the one appropriatism, meaning like, hey, what's appropriate for me may not be appropriate for you, but given my circumstance, here are the things that I find beneficial and that help me live a more meaningful life. They don't create a meaningful life, because things will never do that, but they might augment or enhance my experience.
When I hear questions like, do you know any extreme minimalists with kids? I mean, you can just take extreme out of it. Do you know any minimalists with kids? I mean, we get that question a lot. I think there are so many things in our life that we tend to use as excuses, not just with minimalism, but maybe it's like eating a healthy diet. Oh, I'd eat healthy, but my kids, they're so picky. Like, I got to have those chicken nuggies in their freezer. And, that's what the family eats. We all eat the same thing. I mean, we find these ways to interject these excuses in to make ourselves feel better about not living up to our values and beliefs. So, maybe a better question is do you know any people with kids who live up to their values and beliefs? And of course we do. Yes. Of course we know people like that. All right, now for the real question.
Ryan, it's funny you say that real quick before you move on to the next question. Yeah. I have a good friend who I was just talking to recently, and he actually uses his kids to justify his own poor health decisions. He's like, I just bought Oreos and ice cream. I'm like, dude, you're 40 years old.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And he's like, well, it's for my kids. And I'm like, oh, so you're feeding your kids poorly.
Right.
Really as an excuse so that you can, in the middle of the night go down and get ice cream. And I did my best not to judge him, but I'm putting myself in his shoes. I'm like, I could see myself very easily doing that, because it's easier to say, well, yeah, I have an excuse now because I have a kid, or I have XYZ circumstance. That's my excuse. But remember, even the best excuse is still an excuse.
All right, now for the real question, guys. Alice is getting to the center of it. Are you truly happy?
No, I'm freaking miserable.
I
wish I had more stuff.
I think it's a bad question, personally. I think if we're all, I don't know. Actually, you answer that. Are you truly happy?
I'm happy with my miserable self.
I'm happy with my miserable self.
Yes, that's my answer.
Oh, I love that. What I hear you say, Youheum, is that you are happy with the way that you live your life.
Exactly.
And really what you're doing is you're living your version of a meaningful life. And to me, that's the quality question. Are you truly living a meaningful life? Because happiness is ephemeral. And if you want to be happy, go do heroin. Heroin's a real way to be happy. Go drink yourself to death. I mean, there are many people.
That podcast, Sean.
No, don't tweet that, Sean. No, but I think happiness is something that we get mistaken for living a meaningful life, because living a meaningful life, that's what makes us feel good. You said you're happy with your miserable self, but you're really not miserable. Like you are happy with the pursuit of living a meaningful life that you have.
Yes.
And that, I think, is what we all need to aim towards. I know that happiness is like written in our Constitution. Maybe it meant something a little bit different back then. But now when I think of happiness, I think about this ephemeral thing that we can never truly, we might grab it and have it for a second, but we can never actually hold on to happiness. I mean, anyone who is waking up every single morning, riding a unicorn to work on a rainbow road, just covered in puppies all day long. Even actually that, if you could literally do that, you still wouldn't just be happy 100% of the time. Where the happiness comes from, or where the contentment comes from, is pursuing that meaningful life. So you will get these little bits of happiness, these little bits of joy. But asking, are you truly happy? I don't like that question personally. Yeah.
And Ryan, I would just append what you're saying by saying this. It kind of depends on what you mean by happy. And it also depends on when you ask that question, right? Sometimes when people say happy, they mean pleasure. Are you experiencing pleasure? And Ryan, I really think that's what you're talking about there. Quite often we mistake happiness with pleasure, and the pursuit of pleasure will often lead to discontent. You can go back to the Stoics; they often talked about this, and you look at Buddhism, and they often talk about this. And so, if we're constantly seeking these ephemeral bursts of dopamine, then yes, you might experience pleasure in the moment, but it increases our threshold, and it makes us need more and more and more in order to experience the same sort of level of pleasure. Beyond that, happiness is a little bit different. Happiness has to do with making the right choices, but that's going to ebb and flow throughout our days, right? You're not going to be happy 100% of the time. That's called being manic, and that's not a way that any of us want to live. Ryan, you brought up the word contentment earlier, and I think that's a much more noble pursuit, contentment. And then beyond contentment is joy, which I believe can be experienced only with other people. And so you can experience contentment on your own. That is a sort of prolonged or sustained happiness. But joy makes room for all of the other emotions in life, whether that is guilt or grief or sadness or levity or whatever it may be. The joy makes room for all of life, and it is possible to be in an unpleasant circumstance, but still experience extreme joy. And so as long as we're not confusing those things, the question is, are you truly happy? Maybe if I were to rephrase that now and say, are you truly joyous? My answer to that is absolutely.
Yeah.
But even that is not the pursuit. As you mentioned, Ryan, living a meaningful life, which means aligning my short-term actions with my long-term values, is what's going to bring me the joy. It's going to bring me the contentment. It's going to bring me the happiness. And by the way, I'm not against pleasure. I just don't want that to be the primary pursuit of my life.
Absolutely.
Youheum, I want to thank you for being here today. I'm sorry I didn't get to see you in person. Next time you're in LA, I owe you a hug once all this Corona nonsense is out of the way.
I felt so bad because she went in for a hug when she got here, and I had to like give her the elbow.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I will tell you this. I do want to encourage folks to check out your YouTube channel. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. Is there anywhere else we should send people to check out your work?
My YouTube is enough. And from there, you can discover my other paths as well.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, y'all. Love people, use things. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for your support, patrons. We can't do it without you.
The Minimalists.